everyone. So as Bok mentioned, going to be giving a bit of a talk on what it's been like using Xcode Cloud in production in a real app. So first, a little bit of context about me. I'm an iOS developer with Itty Bitty Apps. And for those who might not be aware, we're a consulting company, so that means we get placed on clients, and I'm currently out at Rease. Yes, the plumbing company, shockingly large tech team there. The team I'm on is the Max team, so we build an app, as well as a website and other things, for tradies to order parts, make quotes, invoices, pay their accounts, that sort of thing. Some context, because it's important for the environment in which it's being used. It's a relatively small team. There's between 4 and 6 developers. So there'll be 4 full-time developers, including myself. And then we usually have 1 or 2 IBL students joining us from time to time. We have what would be a relatively standard, I believe, CI/CD pipeline. So we have a suite of tests that runs on every PR that has to pass before a PR can be merged in. And then every time something does get merged into main, that kicks off an archive that gets uploaded into TestFlight and into App Store Connect. We also do fortnightly releases. Looking at our stats over the last few months, we're averaging around 50 PRs a month, each of which has around 1 to 3 test runs, depending on how many changes get made during that PR process. That test suite contains 3,400 unit test cases, no UI tests, although some of those unit tests are actually kind of UI tests. It's weird and a story for another day. And we're also using pretty much standard Apple tooling across the board. So we're using Swift Package Manager for our dependencies and we were using just raw XC build commands on the command line in GitHub Actions. So this project's gone for a little while. It's got a little under 160,000 lines of code. So we had a couple of problems. Like I mentioned, we were previously using GitHub Actions and their macOS hosted runners to run our test suites. And more accurately, we had 2 problems, and this is what kind of led us to trying Xcode Cloud. So here's the first. Signing is really freaking hard. So many hours got lost in rotating signing certificates or provisioning profiles getting tied to someone's developer account who then left the company and now that's invalid, or keys needed regenerating, or just the API changed and team provisioning profiles are no longer returned, and I'm getting worked up because I was the one who stupidly tried to take a bit of ownership and fix this. But you know what? Maybe this is just a lack of brain cells on me. Maybe if I was smarter or more experienced, we wouldn't have had these problems. But this leads us into what was the second problem. Microsoft just doesn't seem to care about keeping their macOS runners updated. And we really needed them to be updated. In particular, the straw that broke the camel's back for us was Swift 5.8. We really needed that new fulfillment API for XC expectations to play nice with async await. That required Xcode 14.3, which required macOS 13. And we were months into the RC being released, and there was still nothing from Microsoft or GitHub, whatever you want to call them. It ended up taking them 6 months between the RC being finalized and their runner being available. And it just wasn't good enough. So we decided we had to do something. We had to move. Another source control provider like a Bitbucket or a GitLab or any of those wasn't really an option. Rease had just moved everything to GitHub, and getting our own special source approved was not going to happen. And we were pretty close to just buying a Mac Mini and whacking it on someone's desk and forgetting about it, and then having to host our own runners. But then we were still going to have that first problem. Someone was going to have to fiddle with it. Someone was going to lose an afternoon because something went weird, or someone unplugged it, or something dumb like that happened. I'd had a little bit of experience with Xcode Cloud at this point on little hobby projects, and Apple was continuously banging on about how good it was at DubDub. So we decided, let's just give it a go. And that's what we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months now. So how's it actually been? And in short, it's been really good. It really is as easy as Apple makes it out to be to set up. For a different project I worked on, I had to set up the same project on like 4 or 5 different CI providers because we were building a tool that worked across a bunch of them. So we needed instructions, we needed the same project to build the reference instructions for. And Xcode Cloud was by far the quickest and easiest to get up and running. And they actually have shockingly good documentation, especially by Apple standards. In our case, there's just a little GitHub integration you just install, give it an API key, and it just kind of works and just handles kicking off all the builds and all that stuff. And any build phases you have set up in your Xcode project just work. So we have things like project linting, Swift linting, there's a couple of other things that escape me right now, but anything that just happens in your standard local build practice now just happens on CI, no fussing about needed. And the best bit is you get automatic signing back. I have not had to think about or worry any of us with provisioning profiles or signing certificates in months, and it has been glorious. Custom setup is supported. Like I mentioned earlier, we were already on pretty much all Apple standard tooling. But if you're using something like a CocoaPods or a Fastlane, there is the ability to use that. Unfortunately, this tooling isn't installed by default like it is on some other providers. So you have to use the homebrew instance they have to install it yourself, which means you're now paying to install CocoaPods every single time, which isn't great. But at least it's an option. But speaking of that, how are the runtimes? And they're really good. This is our average from all of our GitHub Actions runs, and then for the last few months running Xcode Cloud. And you can see it's a fair bit less. And this is also handicapping Xcode Cloud. Our project has continued more and more tests, more and more files and code, also increasing the number of modules and just made our build process generally more complex. And it's still averaging quite a bit lower. For GitHub Actions, for our build and then run our test suite, it was going from 31 minutes down to 24. And then for our archive and upload, it went from 20 minutes down to 13. For this time as well, the cost is remarkably low. The first 25 hours are free, and then after that, you pay and subscribe in tiers. This is what the cost looks like when compared to all the other, few of the other major CI providers. Xcode Cloud is that green line on the bottom. And you can see, compared to GitHub or GitLab, especially once you start needing a lot of CI runtime, it ends up being an order of magnitude cheaper. This is zooming into the kind of bottom part of that graph. And by hour 38, it's cheaper than everything else. What it's effectively getting you is, this is what the graph would look like if you were just paying the Linux runner rate, because if you're not aware, GitHub Actions charges 10 times as much for their macOS runners as their Linux runners, and that ends up being about the cost of Xcode Cloud. So like I said, it is about an order of magnitude cheaper. So what does the day-to-day experience look like? So this is going to be kind of comparing to GitHub Actions, which is what we were using beforehand, but a lot of it's fairly similar to all the other major providers. So in your PR process, it looks exactly the same. You get your little checks that run at the bottom of your PR, and you get either your checks pass or your checks fail. For us, we have it. It alerts us. You can just set it up to ping a Slack channel or email you, or there's also a webhook as well to notify your team in any way you want. And again, this is something that just comes out of the box. You just give it an API key and just tell it ping this channel when you've done. No setup required. And then something that I really like is that you get your test reports directly in Xcode now. Particularly with Xcode 15 and the new test reports and all the insights features, you now get that directly. So in the test report column, you just have a extra little tab that hits cloud, and you can see any runs that are active for PRs that are open at the moment. Got a little video here of what that looks like. This is just running locally because I couldn't share the actual work one since it's got security work stuff. But you can see there's a list of your test runs. You can see you've got a failed instance here, and then you can just jump directly to the source code of what the test failure was. And of course, this was always possible to do. You could always get that XC result bundle out of your tool of choice. But not having to go switch context into Safari, download the thing, open it, it's clogging up your downloads folder. They're usually fairly big, so they take a little while to download. Just getting that directly there automatically is a really nice little side benefit. So problems, and nothing is perfect, but it's really not been much. One of the big major ones, major's overselling it, is that you get no ability to specify the test flight destination for what everything gets uploaded to. So you can have multiple targets in your project, but when you create an Xcode Cloud instance, that gets tied to a specific app, and then everything gets built tries to get uploaded to that. So for instance, we use Vexel to create a separate settings app that gets distributed to internal testers. And you need a separate Xcode Cloud instance for that because you can't say, upload the main app here, upload your settings app over here. There is no way to specify that. Billing is also done in tiers rather than per minute, unlike most of the other providers. So if you need 26 hours of runtime, you're now paying for 100. Given how much cheaper it is, you're still probably going to come out ahead, but it's a little annoying. And then also, it's no configuration as code. Everything has to be done through a GUI, so it's either done through Xcode itself or through the App Store Connect in the web interface. So there's no ability, you can't version things, you can't source control them, you can't check them in, you can't get them approved. There's kind of just somebody makes a change at some point. So, based on all that, would I do it again? Would I suggest this as something, knowing what we know now, having really used it? And I think based on how positive I've been so far, absolutely. It has been great. It has been so much easier to set up than all of the other providers. It pretty much has just worked. I could count on one hand the number of run failures we've had that haven't been tied to our own configuration or our own balking things up. And it's so much cheaper that what I would do is I would just, starting a new project, just try Xcode Cloud to start with. At most, you're going to burn an hour if it turns out to completely fall over and not work. But if it does work, you have saved yourself so much headache. It is now my default for anything small or medium sized. I'm sure it doesn't scale to an ANZ, for instance. But if all you need is just run some tests, upload a build to App Store Connect when things merge in, it is a fantastic option. That's it. I'm happy to answer any questions now or reach out on Slack or Mastodon. Was there anything?
Yeah, I've got. I have a question to start off with, but just a reminder first to anybody watching online to, if you have any questions, to post in Slack or on the YouTube chat, and I'll catch them for you. How does Apple go with updating runners for betas and things like that? Like, how far behind a beta release is it available on Xcode Build?
I have never seen a beta be available publicly to us that isn't available on Xcode Cloud. It seems to be instant.
That's a tick in their favour. GitHub
Yeah.
is like, 2 weeks minimum sort of thing? So, yeah. Were there any questions in the room? Anybody had?
Any recommended learning resources that you'd sort of send our way?
Yeah, I can post things in the channel afterwards. Honestly, Apple's dub sessions are really good, and they kind of have some beginner ones for kind of overview of the project and then progressively building up to more and more complex workflows. And how to do some of the more interesting things, like how to use like bash scripts to swap out app icons for different build configurations, how to ping multiple Slack channels, that sort of thing.
Were there any other questions in the room? If not, you have one? No? How did you overcome the no different targets and test flights thing? Did you have to write a separate script for that, or go back to GitHub Actions?
No, so we just have 2 separate Xcode Cloud instances. The settings app is so small that it's fine on the free plan because it doesn't need any tests and it builds in a minute. So we just have 2 instances.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, if, say, for instance, you were white labeling an app and you had multiple meaningful configurations that each took their own big amount of time to build, that's where I could see that being more of an issue.
But then you could also build those, on-build those to your different customers if you're white labeling your app too. So that's potentially a benefit.
Yep.